Good morning, everybody. It's Monday, the 3rd of February. This is today's trending episode. I'm Jamie.
And I'm Gareth. Today's show is brought to you by Red Life Therapy. For healing at a cellular level, head over to redlifedevices.com and use the code Ickonic for 10% off all Red Light devices. Hopefully, the tariffs aren't going to make them more expensive, Jamie.
Hopefully not, mate. Hopefully not. They don't affect us just yet, but they're threatened to.
There's a lot of threats going on. So we're going to get into this, aren't we, today? Because there's always something else behind it, isn't there? So the tariffs, it's the major story, really, ladies and gentlemen, because we've got Trump threatening the EU today.
Yep, EU today.
Not a fan of the EU, obviously. He's put tariffs on China, Canada, Mexico. Obviously, all those, both trade blocs and nations, are now vowing to get revenge and do the same. So as with all these things, the only people that will suffer will be the people.
Yeah, it's funny that he's put 25% tariffs on Mexico and Canada and only 10% on China, when China are the ones that are probably putting more product into America than those two countries. I think he probably a war he didn't want to pick.
China.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly that. It's one of those things, ladies and gentlemen, that we were talking about last week. Me and Rich were talking about the whole AI thing and how most people would be against AI, or at least very skeptical of it, fearful of it, because, you know, Elon Musk himself has said it's the end of humanity, could be the end of humanity.
Or at one level, taking jobs. Just that alone would scare so many people.
Well, exactly. And it does take jobs. I mean, you know, you only need to go into your local supermarket and see how many automated tills there are now compared to how many there were 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, when 100%. There weren't any. They're taking over, and that's what AI is all about. But what we were saying was basically, by creating this race with China, so China's got this new AI, it's come out of nowhere, and they're beating the Americans with it. And so we need to compete with them. You get people on board that wouldn't normally be on board, because, I mean, the example I gave in trending last week was basically anyone at home who's got young kids. You try and get your kid dressed in the morning, it can be a nightmare. They're all limbs, right? And then all you need to do is say, right, it's a race, I'll race you, I'm going to get ready first, and they will get dressed as quick as they can. Yep. And that's basically what's happened here. Is the people that would normally push back against AI are now going, well, the China's winning, we need to get on it. Those same people that would be against tariffs, because taxation is theft after all, are now cheering on because, well, they do it to us, and so now it becomes a war. And all that ever happens in things like this is that the 1% get richer and the 99% get poorer. Yeah,
because the cost of living is already incredibly high. And this is only going to increase the cost of basic goods. It's only going to increase the cost of basic goods, which doesn't affect the governments. It affects the people that are trying to feed their families, trying to heat their homes, all of those things. So this trade war helps no one. No. Helps absolutely no one. Funny enough, when we talk about tariffs, talk about tax, I was shocked to read that into the 20th century, there was no taxation on income in America. I think it was about 1917, I think it was. You kept every penny that you earned.
That's how it should be.
what a complete, incredible transformation in just over 100 years.
Well, but yeah, you're right. On everything now, Jay. You can't do anything without being taxed on it.
No, you can't, and you can't even leave money to your kids without being taxed on it. Even though you'd already paid tax on it how many times through your life. But you're right. This is only going to affect the people that are at the bottom of the food chain, which is obviously us, and in this case, the American citizens, Mexican citizens, Canadian citizens, Chinese citizens, and so on. And it's very clear that this has been done to destabilize the kind of global harmonious, culture between countries. And also, as you mentioned there, it plays into the tribalism aspect of, America is seen as the dominant global power, and they're seen as this sort of back and forth, isn't there, between China, between Russia, to take that global control and power away from America, from the US dollar for international transactions and so on. And all this is going to do is those sort of, God and country type Americans are going to probably actually go, yeah, this is going to bite, this is going to hurt, but we've got to do it because those pesky Chinese, we can't let them take over, we can't let them do this, we can't let them do that. And as a result, as you mentioned, they'll support things that if Biden or Harris were doing them, they'd be shouting from the rooftops, which just kind of plays into that point that we've said a few times on the show, is that politics doesn't matter. It's what people do. Not who they supposedly stand for, it's what they actually do. And if you're looking at who's doing it before deciding whether you support or oppose it, you've lost the plot.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, if you know, you can apply it to this whole Greenland nonsense and, you know, Canada being the 51st state and all that stuff. If Biden was coming out with this rhetoric, people would be calling it out for the absurdity that it is. And I personally believe that's what the whole MAGA psyop is all about. It's about getting people on side, and I'm sure people would be shaking their heads and getting right fed up with me. But that's fine. I think that's what it's about. It's about getting people to agree to stuff that they wouldn't normally agree to. Now, another thing we spoke about, Jay, before we went on air, is at the end of the day, if you're putting tariffs on products, then obviously that you know, product producer, manufacturer, logistics, all the way down the food chain, they are then going to apply that tariff to you, the customer. So when people say, oh, the price of such and such has gone up, but it doesn't tend to affect the businesses massively because they just hand that to the customer.
They do.
We end up paying the difference, basically. So we lose again.
100%.
But another thing that tends to happen, particularly in food products and stuff like that, and medical products, we've spoke about this before, the FDA, basically stuff gets through in America that wouldn't get through in Europe and wouldn't get through in the UK. I mean, we're not perfect, far from it. But in terms of stuff that's allowed to go into food, it doesn't fly here, whereas it does in the United States. So what you will end up doing is, okay, yes, I can pass on the tariff cost to the customer, or another way that I can try and get around it is I can use cheaper products.
That's definitely part of it. The other thing you've got here is you have to have more in-depth nutritional analysis and information on food products than you do in America. Basically, you know, here you have to have a breakdown of, you know, caloric intake, proteins, sodiums, things like that. You don't have to do that in America. So in terms of labeling, here it's a lot stricter. I mean, it's still not, as you mentioned, it's not great, but how many people have heard the phrase things aren't built like they used to be? And you can apply that to so many different things. You apply that to everything from cars to houses to food. And a lot of that is because of the bottom line for people. They pass that on to the customer in the sense of they give them a lower quality product, probably invariably charge more for it. And as a result, you're getting something that's not lasting anywhere near as long. You're getting something that's an inferior product. And especially if that's food and that's related to your health, that's going to be so damaging in the long run. Hence why, if you look at this video that Trump's made this morning, which we'll play now, where he's talking about the EU and the UK being at a deficit in terms of America buy more goods from us and from the EU than we buy from them. You know, we don't buy any of their farm products. We don't buy any of their cars.
They don't take our cars. They don't take our farm products. They take almost nothing. And we take everything from them. Millions of cars, tremendous amounts of food and farm products. So the UK is way out of line, and we'll see the UK, but European Union is really out of line. UK is out of line, but I'm sure I think that one can be worked out. But the European Union it's an atrocity, what they've done.
Two things. Notoriously, American cars are rubbish, invariably. And secondly, their food products, as Gaz has just pointed out, the standard and the quality of them is significantly lower than what is, you know, allowed here. And even what's allowed here isn't good enough. But you know, the amount of chemicals, the amount of additives, preservatives, and so on that go into American foods is astonishing. Hence why close to 50% of the population over 20 have one or more chronic health illnesses, and obesity is exploding. Childhood obesity is exploding, diabetes, etc. Do you want that coming here?
No.
I mean, it's on its way already. It's already growing, but do you want... I mean, at least there's some barriers to entry at the moment.
We've lost the American audience by saying that the cars are rubbish.
Well, they are. I mean, I drive a, what's it called, a Mustang, but apart from that...
It's one of those things, I think, ladies and gentlemen, where there is a sales pitch to it, and I understand the sales pitch. And the sales pitch is if we apply these tariffs onto foreign goods, it means that we won't end up buying foreign goods, we'll buy our own.
Yeah.
Now, I get that, totally. You know, I think we should produce our own products within our own country. The amount of stuff that Britain used to produce that no longer does.
Well, that's the point you just made there.
It's mad, but there's a transition period.
Yeah, there is.
You know, where you can't just go, do you know what, everyone? We're just going to buy American now. Now, on the face of it, that sounds great. But if every American did that, you wouldn't have the infrastructure to manage it straight away.
No, you wouldn't.
You wouldn't have the ability to produce in that scale. And so there is that gap. Now, I understand moving towards something, because I agree. I think we should make all our own products in our own countries. But then there's that gap in between. And I think that what they want is a trade war, because I think they want to push us into economic collapse. I think we're heading there anyway, but it's by design, because obviously when anything collapses like that and everyone loses everything, anything tangible like land, anything of value gets sucked up by the 1%.
Yep.
They never lose. This is what people don't tend to realize, is actually when it comes to an economic collapse, and you can apply this back into the Great Depression 100 years ago, the house doesn't lose.
No, it doesn't.
The people lose.
I think what you just said there is really key, producing, because how many things now that we used to produce here, that America used to produce, that France used to produce, Canada, all these countries, they now don't. So if all of a sudden there is a trade war and we are just going to, get from our own. Well, how many things that you can get hold of today, you're not going to be able to get hold of tomorrow? And all of a sudden then people have a consequence.
Yeah.
I do believe that there is an arrogance now among, not necessarily an arrogance, maybe that's the wrong word, but there is an entitlement among people that they expect certain things to be on the shelves when they go in the supermarket. And I think, for people around the world, but certainly in this country from what we remember, is when you walked into the shelves in, mid 2020 and there wasn't pasta on the shelves, like that was a whoa, hang on a minute, what's going on here? That was a real event, because that just doesn't happen.
Well, famously, toilet roll,
there was fights over that. And I think, if you're getting to the point that, certain things that are just not produced here anymore, certain things that are just not produced in whatever country, they then are not available, people are going to notice that. People are going to be more up in arms at the fact that this is going on, because it affects me now. It's not a case of, okay, I'll buy this product, that's more expensive. No, I'll just go and buy from, Bob down the road that makes it in his back bedroom. Well, they don't do that anymore in the same way.
No, and also it's about ingredients, whether that be with food or whether that be with product. It's the bits that go into it. So Dave in his back office or whatever might well be building something. You go, I'll just buy it off Dave. Yeah, but where's Dave getting the parts?
Yeah.
Some of those parts literally aren't produced in our countries. You have to import them, and then there's a tariff on them, and then so therefore the overall product becomes more expensive. And who pays for that? You and me.
Yeah.
I don't think anything here is by accident, and I do think that application of tribalism or to appeal to people's tribal nature is a way of getting it through and getting people to agree to it.
It is. You also create a dependency on a certain country to supply certain things, and I mean, I urge people now, take a look at the things around you in your house and look where it's made, and probably 50% will be made in China. Yeah. So there's a huge dependency there, and if there's a trade war there, one of the biggest ones people don't talk about is the chips that go into computers, graphic cards, things like that. About 95% of them are made in Taiwan. If things like that become a problem, then the world is going to slow down and notice very, very quickly, because it's so dependent on technology, and it's so dependent on supply chains from the Far East, that if there is a trade war, I get the feeling that the Americans, the Europeans are going to feel it a hell of a lot more than the Chinese.
Yeah. And the thing is, I get the sales pitch, like I said a moment ago. I understand. I think we should be moving towards self-sufficiency within our own nations, 100%. It's just a case of, I also don't trust politicians, and I don't trust the parasite class, full stop. So none of this will be for our benefit, because it never is. Another thing, just to throw to very quickly before we move on, is obviously there's a huge move with crypto. I mean, there's a few, crypto scams been coming since Trump's come into office, but that's a whole nother conversation. But there's this huge move towards crypto and to AI and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, if you have such a massive trade war and it causes a massive economic collapse, you can then usher in that as the savior to it.
Yep.
Now, I understand why people get behind crypto, because it's been sold in such a way that it's very alternative. It's almost against the establishment. It's against the deep state. But don't forget, and this will become relevant to a story we're going to come to later on, it's also a digital currency.
Yeah, it is.
So again, it's still moving you. People go, to get away from, central bank digital currencies, go for Bitcoin, but it's still a digital currency though, mate.
It is, and it does exactly what they want it to do. It'd be a great idea. Get everyone that's an alternative thinker or slightly independent thinker to put all their money into something, crash it, and then no one's got any money.
There you go.
It would be if you were a James Bond villain, that would not be a bad tactic, would it? Right, we're going to move on, because you mentioned politicians you don't trust. Well, here's a perfect example. So the reason we want to cover this is to make the point that we're not going to vote our way out of this, because if we vote in a way that they don't want us to vote, they'll simply stop it from being fulfilled in the way it should be. Yeah. And I think most people that are have looked at this will agree, some won't, that the Brexit vote wasn't meant to happen. I don't think the establishment saw that coming. I think the vote was almost certainly wider than 52-48, but it was so wide that rigging it was simply not an option. So this story is another confirmation that since that vote in 2016, there has been time after time where they have put blocks in the way of making Brexit a success for two simple reasons. One, the last thing the EU want is a good example of what happens if you leave. It's the same way that, if you're in a toxic relationship and you leave someone, they don't want you to be successful afterwards because that doesn't reflect very well on them. So if Britain left and was very successful, other countries where there's rumblings of leaving the European Union, like in Holland, like in Denmark, like in Italy, there would all of a sudden be hang on a minute, they've left, it was successful, maybe it's not so scary anymore. And the massive fear-mongering and propaganda that we had here about how devastating it would be if we left wouldn't work there because they'd have an example to highlight to go, hang on a minute, you said all this would happen, it didn't happen to them.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, it would be massively detrimental to the British political class, both in terms of money and also in terms of the agenda that they are trying to fulfill. So with that in mind, this is the story. UK fishermen's fury at Brexit, as 1,700 EU vessels still plunder British oceans. Now, during the Brexit referendum, one of the big arguments was about how when joining the European Union, Britain had lost control of its fishing industry and lost control of its economic waters, if you like, which used to be 20 miles outside of the coastal point of the UK. That was exclusively only allowed to be fished in by British fishermen. That then changed. You had trawlers coming across, obviously, from France, up from Spain, from Portugal, and Northern Europe. And as a result, there was so many boats fishing in the same ocean that it just became basically very difficult for British fishing fleets to stay alive. Completely decimated
the fishing industry. And if you look at the Brexit vote, Jay, all those places like Sunderland, Hull, places that were dependent on fishing, they were. I mean, what was Sunderland, like 70 something?
Yeah, it was incredibly high. And so this story basically is pointing out that the no deal Brexit, which doesn't really mean no deal because everyone voted for no deal because there was no deal on the table when it was vote yes or no. It was just vote yes or no. It wasn't vote yes or no under these conditions. So everyone voted for no deal. So the idea no one did is complete fabrication. But basically they're saying that there's no deal, so therefore there's no kind of protocol and it's just still cracking on like they were the whole time. Which, if you were genuinely a politician who wanted to make Brexit a success, this would have been one of the first things you would deal with. Because this also ties in with the whole stopping the small boats coming across. It's controlling your waters. It's controlling your borders. Yeah. If you can't stop small boats coming across, how are you going to stop fishing fleets coming in and fishing in those oceans? It could be something that's dealt with in 5 minutes. It really could.
Yeah, but
if they wanted to deal with it.
We've also destroyed our own navy in the same period of time. Now, obviously, I'm no fan of military and war in general, but if we had a competent navy, you could police those waters.
Well, yeah, you'd have a naval blockade. That's what you would do. You'd have a naval blockade. I think, I'm a big believer that actions have consequences, and as long as you know what the consequence is of your action, whatever that consequence might be, if you choose then to still do that action, whatever the consequence is, it's kind of on you. If someone says to me now, if you try and punch me in the face, I'm gonna hit you back. I'm not complaining when they hit me back if I decide to try and punch them in the face. So if there was a consequence of, right, there's going to be a naval blockade or there's going to be, Coast Guard, and if you are caught, you will be fined. If you are caught, your boats will be turned around. You will not be getting past this, barrier that we have built. You will be detained. All those sort of things, if they are a consequence and they actually are followed through with, all of a sudden the news stories about, this has happened in the channel today, this has happened here. Well, I'm sorry, you knew the consequences and you chose to do it anyway. I know, if me and you tried to sneak into France on a boat, we'd be arrested. If we flew to America on a fake passport, we'd be arrested. I'm not complaining that happens if that's what happens, because I knew it was something I shouldn't have done in the first place. So again, rather than just accept that this is how things are, I think we need to actually stand up and go, you know what, this isn't acceptable. This isn't acceptable. This is what we voted for, and put more and more pressure on these politicians to actually follow through with it. Because again, it's like attacking the farmers, as we've seen. Again, attacking the fishermen is another attack on the food supply. It's another attack on the food supply. You're an island nation here in Britain. If ever there's real food shortages, your fishing industry and ability to use the sea and your natural environment to supply food would be one of the first places you'd think to go. But by decimating it and making lots of these fishing fleets go out of business, so there isn't any, And also part of it, for another day, is driving up the prices in some of these coastal towns. So people that can't afford to live there anymore that do this kind of work, they go to second homeowners from London. A lot of Cornwall's gone that way. It just drives these people into something else. In the same way, how many farmers now will go and do something else because they can't survive? And both of those things attack the food supply, which is only part of the agenda, because you create a dependency once again.
Well, at the end of the day, we're a nation here with a weather, system that is very good for, fertile land.
Yep.
England's green, pleasant lands, where the farmers are being destroyed. We're an island nation surrounded by, fish that other people are plundering. We're sat on coal. We're sat on oil. We're surrounded by seas full of gas, and we're paying the highest energy prices on the planet. And we're importing oil, and we're importing gas, and we're importing coal. So at the end of the day, our politicians, what we want is for them to have our interests at heart, to be UK first, but they're not, which is why they never implemented Brexit. They didn't want Brexit.
No, they didn't want Brexit.
The political class didn't want Brexit. The peasants voted wrong. Now, from the beginning, one, they didn't implement it properly at all, and two, all they did was attack it. So if anything bad happened economically, it was because of Brexit. If anything good happened economically, it was in spite of Brexit. And that was how the media portrayed it, because the media class is owned by all these maggots, basically. But another thing you do, so by doing that, you make it look like it was a bad idea. So then people will go, well, you give me another vote so I can change my mind. But then there's a lot of people that are I voted Brexit and I meant it.
Yeah, I'm one of them.
So am I. So then how you attack them is you try and basically make them become apathetic towards it in the end. And by how you do that is you make out that, you voted for it, you got it, but it hasn't worked anyway. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you vote, because actually nothing will happen. So in the end, you have a referendum next time, and those people that were so fired up to leave the EU, are they going to come out in the same numbers?
No. Because
we voted to leave the EU before, and look what happened. Nothing. Waste of time.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's by accident either.
Well, I think it ties into the bigger problem of how people have been gaslit to think that we work for the politicians when it's the other way around. And there's this, the politicians are not doing it, are they? Well, hang on. Let's say you live in a constituency that has 50,000 people that have an MP. That MP has no power. He has the power given to them, or him or her, by the 50,000 people, however many that voted them in. That's the only power they have. They have your power. They are there to vote, to carry out tasks on your behalf based on what you want them to do. They're a public servant. It's not a high power, look at me, big Jack the Lad job. You're a servant. You're a custodian, basically, because the 50,000 people in that constituency can't all go to Parliament. So they have one person they send on their behalf to carry out the actions that they want. That's the dynamic. Yeah. That's how it should work.
But it's not the reality.
It's not. And I think if you break it down to a small level, you have like local councils, people that live in the town, live in the village. They have to face those people. They have to be in the pub. They have to walk in the local shop. They have to face the people that they supposedly represent. So if they do things they don't like, there's going to be consequences. Whereas the politicians in Westminster or in, the White House, Capitol Hill and so on are so detached from reality, they never have to face consequences for their actions. They walk around with security day in, day out. They have armed guards on their houses. They just do not live in the real world. And that's why the desires and wishes of the population are never reflected in the actions that they carry out. And this is just another example of that.
Yeah, because they don't work for us.
No, they don't.
All they hear from us is a few mean tweets that they then cry about and want more online harm safety bills and stuff brought in to stop them hearing.
Or put you in jail.
What people think of them. It's an interesting one, Brexit, because there's another story that I think will probably come in the next few days. We'll probably talk about it on Training. The fact that Starmer is the first UK Prime Minister since all of that Brexit stuff to actually go and meet with the EU, essentially as a peer, and sit alongside them and discuss. Now, there would be no reason to do that. We're not in the EU. He's constantly said we're going to reset ties. There's that word again, reset. They always tell us. And so I think we will almost certainly find ourselves back in the EU, whether we know it or not.
Yep.
Okay, so final story. It relates, I guess, to the first story, where we were talking about tariffs and how you can, maybe answer any economic collapse with crypto and stuff, where everything is a digital currency. This story is from the UK. This is Barclays Bank, which is obviously a huge bank in the UK. Now, their online services and their app was down for 3 days. Now, 3 days don't sound that long, right? But if you've got no access to money for 3 days...
Yep.
It's destroyed people. There was one family that have ended up homeless because they sold their house. The purchase of the new house, family house, so they've got kids and everything, was supposed to go through. The site went down. The money didn't go through. They didn't complete on the house. And if anyone knows about buying houses in the UK, the amount of paperwork,
red tape is insane.
It's insane. And so they've ended up basically couch surfing now because they've got nowhere to live. Now, let me just read this. So Barclays has advised customers to contact food banks after a major IT glitch left some, it wasn't just some, it was hundreds and hundreds, locked out of their accounts with disruption likely to continue today. The bank has warned that some customers may see an outdated balance. Payments made or received may not show following the initial outage of online and mobile banking. Now, it's another example, if we needed it, that we cannot allow ourselves to move into a cashless society. No. Because if this goes down and you've got some cash, even if it's under the mattress, you can still feed the kids.
Yeah, you can.
You can still go and get some groceries, and you can still go and get some fuel and put it in the car so that you can get the kids to hospital. Heaven forbid one of them hurts himself.
Yeah, you can get to work.
You can get to work or whatever. You take away that you have no ability. If your card doesn't work and you have no cash, you're done.
Yeah, you are done. The other thing this will do is create a massive stress amongst people. Imagine, let's say you've got $5,000 in the bank, and imagine going into your bank account and there's nothing, where it says outdated balance. That's all I've got in the world. I'm done. What am I going to do? And I mean, the idea that this has been some kind of accident is possible. The amount of technology that happens with these banks, something glitching is quite possible. But it's a warning, whether it's an accident or it's a deliberate tactic, it's a warning that, as Gaz pointed out, cash is absolutely imperative. And I think one of the biggest things to advise is to keep, at least, if you can, a good few days worth of cash at home where, if you can put food on the table if you need to, you can put petrol in the car and you can survive, you can get a night in a hotel if you need to. All of those things that at the moment, if you don't have access to a card, because again, they've done this deliberately over the number of years, convenience. You don't have to carry a wallet around. You don't have to carry coins around. It's annoying. They've also made it convenient for shop owners and shopkeepers and restaurants, hence why so many of them are cashless now, card only. It's convenient. It's so much easier than carrying cash. Boop. Exactly. You not even need a card now. You can have it on your phone. And, obviously you had through the COVID period that cash was dangerous and it was a vector of disease and all of that thing. And so many people during that period that went cashless or that got used to just paying on card have just continued to do that. They haven't gone back to how they used to live. So anyone would think it was behavioural conditioning, wouldn't they? Just being a bit conspiracy-minded there. But all that's done is just create a convenience here and a dependency on these systems that if things like this happen, everyone looks around going, what the hell? I don't know what to do. Yeah. I don't know what to do. I've got no money. I've got no access to money. How am I going to pay for this? How am I going to pay for that? I mean, can you imagine how terrifying that would be?
Well, it's another way, like you say, with convenience to bring in a cashless society. They're doing the same with digital IDs. It's all convenient. Oh, you can just go bop on your phone. You don't need to get your ID out your wallet and all that sort of stuff.
What an effort.
I know, what an effort, yeah. And the same with driving licenses. I don't need to carry my driving license around. It's all digital. It's all on my phone and stuff like that. It's so much easier. And 15-minute cities you can apply it to. Wow, it's great. It's so convenient. You can have everything you need within 15 minutes. Oh, that sounds amazing. And then it suddenly becomes you can only get everything you need within 15 minutes. And that's where they bait and switch. What it also showed to me, Jay, is not just the danger of a cashless society. There's so many examples of that already. But it's also how close people are to the cliff edge all the time. As soon as you basically take away someone's ability to nip to the shops and go book with a card, then they don't have the food in the house. Yep. They don't have a rainy day fund under the bed. No. They don't have anything set up, a contingency plan if things go down.
60% of Britain are 2 paychecks from the street and have less than £1,000 in savings.
Yeah.
That's what I was reading over the weekend looking at this, which, you know, £1,000 sounds a lot of money, but how much are rents these days? That and bills, and that's a month probably.
Well, that's the thing. You know, £1,000. I mean, £1,000 is a lot of money, but at the end of the day, it's a lot of money. But then suddenly, the car that you need to drive to go to work, suddenly, you know, what are a couple of sets of brakes now? Like 400 quid or something.
Well, yeah, and if you say your rent, you say it's a lot of money, but in the world we live in today, in the country here, it's not. If you rent 700 quid, what's 700 quid getting you now? A 2-bedroom flat?
Well, it depends where you live. It's not getting you much.
It's not getting you much. Your council tax is 200 now. They've changed that. Your bills are probably 100 plus more. There's your grand gone before you've eaten a meal.
Right.
So it's clear to see that this has been created, and it's been created by the never never society, the never never culture, where you're encouraged to have these credit cards. I think I was reading as well, the average Brit has $3,000 of credit card debt. You add in you got a car on finance that if you don't pay, they'll take away. Obviously, you know, if you've got a mortgage or rent, whatever, it doesn't really matter. You stop paying it, they'll take it away. You got credit cards, all these things that just, how much of your money essentially is spoken for before you've even got it? It's going out to left, right and centre, here, there and the other. And obviously if you're then doing that, you're probably then continuing to add to that debt to function. And that's all deliberate. And it's been created by, like I say, what we would say the never, never culture, where you don't feel like you're paying for it. Because I've just bought this car, it's 10 grand, it's lovely. But I haven't paid 10 grand, I'm paying 200 quid a month. It's like, but it's not your car then. Because the second you stop paying 200 quid a month, it's gone. Same with your house, same with so many different things. And as a result, people get in a position where a couple of paychecks are gone and everything falls apart. Everything falls apart. So it's clearly been done on purpose. That was the 2008 banking crash, wasn't it?
Yeah,
they sold houses to people who couldn't afford it. Interest rates were, I can afford this house now. All of a sudden, interest rates go up. And I can't afford that house anymore. I've lost that house. I'm now back on the street, essentially. And that happened to so many people. And it's happening again now.
Yeah, and it will almost certainly get worse. But I think, you know, also, this is a very small example, but we put up with stuff now that we didn't put up with before as a society. Like, for instance, if I go back, say, 15 years, maybe 20 years, if you were buying a football shirt, like I'm a Derby County fan, so if I was buying a Derby County shirt, they weren't allowed to change that shirt more than 2 years.
2 years, yeah.
So you used to have a little tag on it that would say 2002 to 2004. So you had to keep that shirt for 2 years. They weren't allowed to change the shirt because football shirts are expensive. They're a hell of a lot more expensive now than they used to be. Now, you have an away shirt, you have a home shirt, you have a third shirt, you have a shirt that you wear for European competitions. And, you know, your kids who have, you know, no understanding of money, why would they? They're children. You know, they want the latest shirt and they can change it all the time. And a shirt is 100 quid now. We would never have taken that 20 years ago.
No, you wouldn't have done.
People wouldn't have put up with it.
No,
so they couldn't have got away with it. But now people just seem to go, yeah, well, it's just the way it is, isn't it? And it's that apathy that they create from us that then, you know, it's a perpetual cycle. It just carries on. They push us, we accept it, they push us some more.
Well, the biggest thing they've tried to push on us is resistance is futile. Is no matter what you say, no matter what you do, doesn't matter. Same thing's going to carry on. And they need you to believe that, because if you stop believing that and you start thinking, actually, you know what, I have an influence here. And the biggest one I have an influence on is where I spend my money. And I'm not going to spend it in companies that do X, Y, and Z. Imagine if you mentioned Derby County, great, just for one example, but there's 92 football clubs in this country in the league. Imagine if half the fans went, you know what, I'm not buying a kit. I'm not buying it this year because that's just disgusting what they've done. Do you think they'd notice? Yes, they would. And they would absolutely have to then do something about it. You know, essentially, football's a great metaphor for life. You've got the majority watching a minority, funding it, not necessarily happy about what's going on, feeling like they can't influence it. Well, they can. Yeah. They can. You speak with, you know, where you spend your money, you speak with what you support and what you accept. And, you know, the only way out of this mess is to completely tear up the idea that resistance is futile and resist everything that we don't like and refuse to accept anything less. Because if we do, the future doesn't look bright. If we don't, the future looks hell of a lot brighter than it does right now, because we are the majority after all.
Yeah, we need to stop outsourcing our power. Yeah. It's as simple as that. Because people listening to what Jay's saying there will go, but we tried to resist with Trump, and you said it was futile. It's like, yeah, but that's not you resisting. That's you outsourcing,
giving it to someone else. Yeah.
To a guy who is not who you think he is.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's so many solutions. We spoke about it already. You know, what you put in your body is up to you. Eat better, cash, look after, make sure you have some cash. Whatever you set aside as your weekly budget for the week, whether it's 25%, 30% of that, just take it out of the bank and have that, keep that in cash. So if there's ever a problem, you have access to money. Where you spend your money is really, really important. So many things that we can do. Support local communities, whether that's your neighbour, whether that's local businesses, local farms. There's so many things that we can do to at least start to push back. And as Gaz pointed out there, looking at the person back at you in the mirror, being like, that's the person I'm giving my power to, not some guy on a screen or some person in a corporation. We've done that. And look where it's gotten us. But yeah, I think that's us for this morning. Thank you so much for joining us. Today's show was brought to you in association with Ape Nutrition, bringing British organic food supplements onto the market. Head over to apenutrition.co.uk and use the code Ickonic Media for 10% off the range. And we'll be back with you again in the morning.
See you later.